Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. So please subscribe when you're finished listening. You can also go to snarkymoviereviews.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Today's movie is The Setup, 1949. The film is based on a poem by Joseph Moncure March about a black boxer with the stuff to be a champ but never given the chance. A small piece of the poem reads, "Mean as a panther, crafty as a fox, he could hit like a mule, and he knew how to box. A dark-skinned jinx, with eyes like a lynx, a heart like a lion, and the face of a Sphinx." Sounds like it may be the inspiration for the Warrior's Creed by Dropkick Murphy as well. Actors. Robert Ryan played washed-up boxer Stoker. Ryan was covered in episode 51, Battle of the Bulge, 1965. George Tobias played cornerman Tiny. Tobias was briefly covered in episode 83, Sergeant York, 1941. Herbert Anderson was one of the fight fans. Anderson was covered in episode 50, Battleground, 1949. Wallace Ford played Gus, the head trainer. Ford was covered in episode 31, Warlock, 1959. Audrey Totter played the role of long-suffering wife Julie. Audrey Totter was born in Joliet, Illinois in 1917. Totter began doing stage work, and by 1944, MGM put her under contract. Right off the bat, she started playing the bad girl in films like Main Street After Dark, 1945. Totter had a great film noir career and acted in some of the best-known films of the genre. One of the greatest was The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946, where Totter played a hussy that John Garfield's character picked up. Totter played a tough cookie in Lady in the Lake, 1947, and she sent Philip Marlowe, Robert Montgomery, on a confusing and dangerous route looking for a dead woman. In The Unsuspected, 1947, Totter played a real gold-digging hussy. In Alias Nick Beale, 1949, she played a morally challenged assistant to Ray Milland's character. This was followed by one of the truly great films, The Setup, 1949, where Totter played a loving and devoted wife to a pug boxer played by Robert Ryan. She tries to help as the boxer heads towards destruction. She acted in Any Number Can Play, 1949, with Clark Gable. She also co-starred with Richard Basehart in Tension, 1949. Although she had the talent and training to be a big star, she never quite made it. She was excellent as the bad girl in film noir, and stayed there, perhaps, too long. When film noir shifted to television in the early 1950s, she was left without many options. MGM dropped her contract in 1951. She jumped to a couple of other studios, but the roles never really came back. Totter turned to raising a family and working on television. She even had a long-term role on Medical Center, 1972 to 76. At the age of 70, Totter retired. In 2013, she died at the age of 95. Percy Hilton played Stoker's cornerman, Red. Hilton was born in 1894 in New York City.
I'm walking here!
His family was in vaudeville, and he joined the act at an early age. He was cast in children's roles on Broadway and was mentored by George M. Cohan. During World War I, Hilton served in the Army as part of the American Expeditionary Force. When the war ended, Hilton went back to stage. He also continued in silent movies, having made a couple before the war. Sometime prior to 1940, required screaming in a play left him permanently hoarse. This pointed him in the direction of character acting, where his unusual voice and look made him in high demand. He was prolific on television, but a large majority of his roles were uncredited. He played a drunk Santa in Miracle on 34th Street, 1947. He got his Nor cred in Call Northside 777, 1948, Crisscross 1949, and The Setup 1949. Comedies like Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff 1949, Fancy Pants 1950, and How to Marry a Millionaire 1953. Costume dramas such as Cyrano de Bergerac 1950 and The Robe 1953. Musicals like White Christmas 1954, Jailhouse Rock 1957, and The Music Man 1962. Teen fare like Where the Boys Are 1960. Westerns such as The Sons of Kate Elder 1965, A Big Hand for the Little Lady, 1966, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. And other genres like A Star is Born, 1954, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, 1964, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1954. Hilton had 233 film and television credits before he died in 1971 at the age of 77. Hal Baylor played the role of boxer Tiger Nelson. Baylor was born in Nebraska in 1918. For a time, he was a professional boxer. During World War II, he served in the Marines and was in the battles of Saipan and Tinian. Baylor was a prolific television actor, but he is known for a few movies. The Setup 1949 was Baylor's second film, and he impressively showed his boxing skills with former boxer Robert Ryan. He was in The Sands of Iwo Jima 1949, where actor and non-military veteran John Wayne's character teaches him how to march. He played a soldier in The Young Lions 1958, and a military policeman in the hilarious Operation Petticoat 1959. One of his last films was the post-apocalyptic A Boy and His Dog 1975, written and directed by L.Q. Jones and starring Don Johnson. Baylor died in 1998. Darryl Hickman played Shanley, a boxer having his first pro fight. He is the younger brother of Dwayne Hickman. Born in 1931, Darryl was a successful youth actor. His movies include The Grapes of Wrath 1940, Men of Boys Town 1941, The Human Comedy 1943, Leave Her to Heaven 1945, The Happy Years 1950, and The Tingler 1959. He interrupted his own career in 1951 when he joined a monastery. About a year later, he returned and tried to resume his career. After making a few more movies, he became a programming executive and acting coach. James Edwards played up-and-coming black fighter Luther Hawkins. Edwards was born in 1918 in Indiana. Edwards attended Knoxville College and received a drama master's degree from Northwestern University. He was in the Federal Theater Project during the Great Depression. He was one of the very few African Americans that was an officer in the Army during World War II. His first film role was The Setup 1949. Many of his early acting roles were as soldiers in films like Home of the Brave 1949, The Steel Helmet 1951, Bright Victory 1951, Men of War 1957, Blood and Steel 1959, and Porkchop Hill 1959. Don't forget, he was the mess steward that doled out the sand in the search for the strawberries in the Caine Mutiny 1954. Don't forget, he was the mess steward that doled out the sand in the search for the strawberries in the Caine Mutiny 1954. It is widely believed that he was going to play an important role in Red Ball Express 1952, about the Army truckers that were moving supplies up to a rapidly advancing front during World War II. He was replaced by Sidney Poitier because he would not testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He had a few film noirs as well, playing a war veteran track attendant in The Killing 1956 and as Zeke in the Phoenix City Story 1955. He was great as Corporal Alan Melville in The Manchurian Candidate 1962, and near the end of his career he played an aide to General Patton, George C. Scott, in Patton 1970. Edwards was also a successful television actor, appearing on most of the major shows. Sadly, he died at the age of 51 in 1970. Story: The bell rings and a prize fight begins. The timekeeper is author Weegee Fellick, a New York photographer that influenced film noir with his compositional and lighting style. Only the boxer's legs are shown as the credits roll. As the credit for director Robert Wise comes up, a fighter hits the deck. The clock shows it's 9:05 p.m. and the boxing venue is a small place in Paradise City. AC is assumed to stand for Athletic Club that has boxing Wednesday and wrestling on Fridays. An old pug tries to sell a fight card as a blind fan enters the arena. Other people are waiting and betting on the fights. One man mentions that he remembers watching Bill Stoker Thompson, Robert Ryan, when he was a kid. Manager Tiny, George Tobias, strikes a match on the name of Stoker, and Red, Percy Hilton, says Stoker is in the hotel. Tiny and Red go to the ringside cafe/bar, where Red watches a man almost win a camera with the claw machine, but it slips away at the last second in a metaphor for Stoker's career. Tiny finds a hood and handler for fighter Tiger, Danny, Edwin Marks, at the bar and says everything is set. Tiny asks for the money and is told the deal is with Little Boy, Alan Baxter. The plan is for Stoker to be carried for 2 rounds, then take a dive. The payoff is $50. Tiny says he got $30 and only gives Red a sawbuck.
Did you get it?
Yeah,
How much?
30.
30? I thought you said 50.
You know Danny.
Only a fin.
Don't you want it?
What about Stoker?
What about him?
Oh, he's all set, ain't he? You told him, didn't you?
Why cut him in?
I don't like it, Tiny. Stoker can still punch. If anything goes wrong, Little Boy's gonna blow his
Don't
top.
be a meathead. Nelson will butcher him. It's 100 to 1.
That's just it. There's always the one.
Red thinks they should tell Stoker, but Tiny is sure he will lose the fight anyway. Over at the Hotel Cozy, Stoker and his wife, Audrey Totter, are waiting. Stoker wakes at 9:10. Julie seems unhappy like anyone in her position. You would expect her play to be running out on Stoker. Stoker says he thinks he can beat Tiger Nelson, Hal Baylor. Julie says she is not coming to the fight that night. She doesn't want to watch him take any more beatings. Julie tells Stoker that he is always 1 punch away.
I understand that he's 23 and you're 35, Bill. 35 in this business, you're an old man.
Look, Julie, they're building this kid up, feeding him a lot of pushovers. If I can get over him tonight, that'll mean a rematch. That's a semi-wind-up, 150 guaranteed. Maybe a top spot, even.
Top spot.
Yeah, a top spot. And I'm just 1 punch away.
I remember the first time you told me that. You were just 1 punch away from the title shot then. Don't you see, Bill? You'll always be just 1 punch away.
She wants him to get a regular job. He leaves her a ticket and heads out. Julie looks at her wedding ring and everything says she is running away. Stoker goes to the arena and watches one of the fights as the fans scream for murder and blood.
No, quit stalling. Attention!
Stoker meets Red and Tiny and tells them he is going to win the fight. Stoker is worried about his wife and keeps looking out the window at the hotel. Fighters in all stages, from beginner to broken down pugs, are in the dressing room. These fighters represent all the stages of boxers. New, Darrell Hickman. Prime, that are concerned with religion or dames. Champion, Luther Hawkins, James Edwards, a young black fighter. Over the hill, Stoker. And pugs like Gunboat Johnson, David Clark. It's 9:35 p.m. and Julie is pacing at the hotel. After a bit, she picks up her ticket and heads out. Stoker sees the hotel light go out and he is happy. Julie goes to the arena, but the blood cries of the crowd make her change her mind and leave. She walks through a very shady part of town around the arena. Men hit on her as she passes pawn shops and a cigarette stand where boxing is playing on the radio. Luther Hawkins has his route to the championship all planned. Gunboat comes back after he has been knocked out. Stoker looks at himself in the mirror and wonders how good he is. Julie is passing dive bars, tattoo joints, and bikers. She has a moment of happiness before she sees a boxing game. She walks down dark alleys, and I spend most of the time wondering what bad is going to happen to her as she descends onto an isolated overpass. Another fighter comes in, having lost, as Hawkins goes out. Julie watches the electric trains run by, and you have to wonder if she is thinking about suicide. She rolls the fight ticket in her hand before shredding it and tossing it away. Red is still pushing Tiny to let Stoker in on the fix as they come to take him to the ring. Hawkins wins his fight and wishes Stoker good luck. Stoker enters the ring against Tiger Nelson. In the ring, Stoker sees Julie's empty seat. The gangster Little Boy, Alan Baxter, and his maul are in attendance. Stoker can't keep his eyes off the empty seat. Tiger is told to carry Stoker for 2 rounds. Red keeps telling Stoker to stay away. In round 1, Stoker is taking a beating. Near the end of the round, Stoker lands a headshot and wades into Tiger. By the end of the round, it's a pure slugfest. Stoker starts out losing the second round, but he can take everything Tiger can throw. Same as before, Stoker gives a headshot and digs in. Tiger takes some tough shots to the head. The fighters are talking as they fight, and Tiger mentions the double cross. In the corner, Stoker looks at the empty seat. Tiny tries to convince Stoker to stay in a protective pose. In the third round, Tiger says to Stoker he will tell him when to fall. Stoker pretty much takes a beating, but Tiger can't stop him. Again, Stoker fights back at the end of the round, controlling the fight. Stoker goes down once, then a second time. Tiny leaves the corner, but Stoker gets up. Tiny runs back in shock. The two boxers keep fighting after the bell rings. This time Stoker wants to know why Tiger called him a fink. Tiny tells Stoker to lay down and the fight has been fixed by Little Boy. Stoker takes one last look at the empty seat before heading into the fourth and final round. At first, neither fighter can gain an advantage. The ref keeps checking Stoker's cut above his eye. Stoker goes down, but he hears Julie's and Tiny's voice and makes it back up. Stoker knocks Tiger into the ropes. Tiger is trying to hold on. Suddenly, the crowd is behind Stoker, a la Rocky IV, 1985. Tiny and Red run away as Stoker knocks out Tiger. Tiger takes the count and loses. Stoker makes his way back to the dressing room alone. As Gus, Wallace Ford, tends to his wounds, Little Boy comes in with Danny. Danny sends both trainers out. Little Boy tells him he made a big mistake because he didn't get what he paid for. Stoker says he didn't know or get any money. Little Boy says they will talk about this later and he leaves. Stoker is still concerned with Julie and looks at the dark hotel room. Julie stops by a food stand to get food and beer for her and Stoker. Stoker gets dressed and checks the hallway for the gangsters. Tiger, Danny, Little Boy, and another man are waiting outside for him. He runs through the now empty arena, knocking over folding chairs as he goes. This is very similar to Maish fleeing from the gangsters in Requiem for a Heavyweight 1962. Finally, Stoker finds an open door and goes out into the alley. He sees the hotel cozy and thinks he's made it until the gang spots him. He's trapped like a rat at the end of the alley. Little Boy talks constantly as the other people hit Stoker. Stoker fights back, but there are just too many. Little Boy, who has not participated, waits until the other three have Stoker on the ground. He reaches down and Stoker belts him with a right. Little Boy says you will never hit anyone with that hand again, and the scene slips away to banging jazz music and shadows. Julie is back in the hotel preparing supper. It's about 10:10 p.m. The movie goes silent until it returns to the alley where Stoker is rising to his feet as soft jazz plays. A couple on a balcony thinks he is drunk. Stoker staggers along the wall, calling weakly for Julie. Julie looks out the window and realizes to her horror that Stoker is coming out of the alley. He falls and she runs to him saying his name over and over. Julie sees his hand and asks for an ambulance. Stoker says they busted his hand with a brick, but there was no way he was going to lay down. Stoker realizes he can't fight anymore. Julie says she will make it up to him and it's going to be all right. He tells her he won the fight. She smiles and says we both won tonight. The camera pulls back, leaving them behind, and the clock shows 10:17 p.m. Notes: both Robert Ryan and Hal Baylor had prior boxing experience, making this some of the most realistic boxing ever filmed for a movie. The setup 1949 was eclipsed by the Champion 1949 with Kirk Douglas, although it's not as gritty or as realistic a film. World famous short summary: wife finds joy in her husband's crushed, literally, dreams. I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find the links to social media and the show notes at snarkymoviereviews.com or in the podcast notes. Remember, this show is completely free and independent. All I ask is that you jump over to iTunes and give me a review. It really helps the show get found. Beware the Moors.
Reviews? We got no reviews. We have no reviews. We don't need no stinking reviews.